A review of Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. When the storm of change arrives and lives are turned upside down. When I first read Gone with the Wind, what affected me most was not only the long love story of Scarlett and Rhett Butler, but the familiar sense of an old world collapsing before a new one, a world whose people still refuse to believe that everything was over. I was born in Iran in the early 1980s, in a country that within a few decades has experienced revolution, war, wealth, poverty, hope, and disappointment. In my 40 years of life, I've often felt the ground beneath my feet being redrawn, as if my personal history was written amid ruins and rebuilding. Perhaps that's why, while reading Gone with the Wind, I felt as though the author had written my own story and the story of my generation, just in a different geography. The novel and the lost world of the South. At first glance, Gone with the Wind is a love story set against the backdrop of the American Civil War. With rich detail and world building, Margaret Mitchell writes about the Southern aristocracy, vast plantations, white mansions, and a society built upon the forced labor of enslaved black people. Published in 1936, during America's Great Depression, the novel became not just a love story, but an elegy for a vanished world, a world unjust at its core, yet still mourned by those who have lived within it. Mitchell portrays this world not with anger, but with sorrow and nostalgia. Her characters, from Ashley to the elderly Southern ladies, cannot accept that Torah, the family estate and symbols of older the old order, is no longer what it once was. Behind these portrayals lies a familiar voice, the voice of a the voice of a people who cannot believe that the secure structures of their lives have collapsed. Having lived through my own era of upheaval, I deeply understood this denial and the desperate clinging to the past. Scarlett O'Hara, survival at any cost. At the heart of this turbulent world stands Scarlett O'Hara, beautiful, proud, and self-centered, who, from the first page to the last, desires only one thing: survival. She begins as a spoiled girl living in luxury, but war changes everything. The South is defeated, men die or return broken, and women like Scarlett must shoulder the burden of life. It's then that her true face appears, a woman who will break moral, social, and even emotional rules to stay alive. She adapts to every new storm. She marries for money, goes into business, earns wealth, and carves a path toward forward from the ruins. To me, Scarlet represents the primal human instinct to survive amid catastrophes. She may not be likable, but she is real, the same inner force that awakens in all of us when crisis strikes. During my childhood, when my own society endured war, scarcity, and fear, I saw women like Scarlett around me, no longer pampered, but providers, fighters, and survivors who could never return to who they were before the storm. Ashley, a man between past and future. Yet it was not Scarlett but Ashley with whom I most identified. Ashley is a man of a world that no longer exists, a thoughtful, poetic soul who knows his era has ended but cannot let it go. He sees the South not just as a land but as an ethical and aesthetic order that belongs to the past. Faced with the storm of change, he can only watch, with dignity and sorrow. To many readers, Ashley symbolizes weakness, a man unable to choose, to love fully, or to adapt. But to me, he embodies integrity and in an age of brutality, one who refuses to sacrifice inner beauty and principle for mere survival. In my own life, I have often faced such moments, having to choose between remaining true to my values or adapting to a changing world. Ashley cannot rebel himself like Rhett or Scarlett, but there is an honesty in his failure that feels deeply human. In a society where values shift daily, sometimes standing still, even if it means losing, can be quite act of strength. Perhaps that's why Ashley felt like a mirror to my own self, a man amid ruins, wanting to die with grace rather than live through compromise. Rhett Butler, ruthless realism. Rhett Butler, the third corner of the novel's triangle, is one of Michel's most brilliant creations. He is pragmatic, opportunistic, and passionate. He knows the difference between dreams and reality, that the era of the southern aristocracy is over, and that from chaos one must build profit and power. At first, he seems like the perfect man for a changing world, free from illusions, action-driven, and merciless. But beneath that realism lies a trace of romanticism and longing for the purity of the past. His relationship with Scarlett is a collision of two forces, the instinct to survive and cool realism. They complement each other on the surface but can never truly understand one another. Red knows Scarlett's love for Ashley is just nostalgia, not real affection. Yet he himself is also trapped by longing for something that no longer exists. His final words to Scarlett, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," are not merely the end of a romance, but the death knell of a vanished world and its dreams. War, change, and the anxiety of history. At its core, Gone with the Wind is not a story about war, but about change, change that overturns everything from its foundations. Mitchell shows that war is only the beginning of destruction. What follows is poverty, lawlessness, moral collapse, and the birth of a new generation. The old order dies not just politically, but existentially. As I read, I couldn't help thinking of my own country's history, the revolution that upended values, the war that reshaped society and spirit, and the time when money, power, and survival replaced ideals and virtue. In that context, the defeated South of America felt hauntingly familiar. The feeling of standing among ruins, looking back at a tainted glory and not knowing what face the future will take. Women, power, and the redefinition of roles. One of the novel's most remarkable aspects is its portrayal of women. In a collapsing world, women unexpectedly become the center of power. Scarlett defies her era's ideal of womanhood. She is neither submissive nor merely romantic. She decides, acts, earns, and lies if necessary. In contrast, Melanie represents traditional virtue, gentle, devoted, and faithful. Michelle subtly suggests that neither is complete alone. Scarlett could not have survived without Melanie, and Melanie could not have endured without Scarlett. In my own society, this tension between the traditional and the emerging woman still continues. I grew up seeing women step out of the home's shadow, work, and forge new identities from hardship, carrying within them Scarlett's raw force, the will to live, to survive, even when all seems lost. Tara, home as root. Tara, the O'Hara family plantation, is more than a place. It is the spiritual heart of the novel. Amid all change, Scarlett keeps returning to Tara, to the soil that symbolizes endurance. When she stands among its ruins and vows, "As God is my witness, "I'll never be hungry again." It becomes a prayer, a declaration of rebirth from the dust. For me, Tara evokes the maternal home, not only as a physical space but as the symbol of a past that, however destroyed, still lives in our subconscious. Whenever history accelerates and the world slips away, people search for their own Tara, a point to stand firm and say, "It's not over yet." Gone with the Wind in our time. Nearly a century after its publication, critical perspectives on Gone with the Wind have shifted. Modern readers rightly scrutinize its racial, gender, and political dimensions, exposing its romanticized view of a slave-owning South. Yet beyond these aspects, the novel remains a mirror of humanity facing the destruction of its world. In every age and land, when structures collapse, two kinds of people emerge: those who fight to survive like Scarlett and those who, like Ashley, walk through the ruins with dignity and fade into history. Even in today's society, after decades of change, migration, and redefined values, traces of both types remain, often coexisting within the same person: the will to survive and the loyalty to the past. Language and structure of the novel. Mitchell's prose is classic and richly detailed, with historical precision. She writes of food, clothing, customs, and accents so vividly that the reader feels they breathe southern air. Though over 1,000 pages long, the novel's rhythm is dynamic, oscillating between two forces: love and war, destruction and renewal. At times, its emotional drama overshadows its historical weight, but perhaps this very romantic exaggeration has kept the novel alive for generations. While reading, I swung between exhaustion and fascination, sometimes weary of the long descriptions, yet realizing that those very details make the southern world tangible, turning words into smoke and dust. From Scarlett to Us, a personal reading. When I finished the book, it took time to leave its world, as if I had lived alongside characters who were part of my own history. Like Scarlett, I have known moments of starting over, when everything I'd built lost its meaning, and I had to continue empty-handed. And yet, within me also lives Ashley's yearning, the desire to preserve beauty, decency, and dreams that may no longer exist but cannot be ruthlessly abandoned. This duality between survival and integrity, adaptation and loyalty, forgetting and remembering, is the essence of Gone with the Wind. Mitchell gives no answers. She simply shows how people live, love, lose, and go on between these poles. Reflections from an Iranian experience. For those born in Iran in the 1980s, the idea of Gone with the Wind is not foreign. We too have witnessed wars vanish before our eyes through revolution, war, sanctions, migration, and digital transformation. Each was a storm shaking both our personal and collective Tara. Perhaps that's why, when Scarlett kneels on the dry soil of Tara and swears she'll never go hungry again, we hear her voice not as that of a southern girl, but as a universal human, one who will rise again. In this sense, Gone with the Wind is not merely about America's South, but about any place where people, caught in history's storm, seek themselves between denial and adaptation. Conclusion: what has not been lost? If I were to say in one sentence why this novel matters to me, it is this: it reminds me that even amid destruction, life endures. Great wars, political systems, cultures, homes, and beliefs may all be blown away, but the human power to rebuild remains. At the novel's end, Scarlett's famous words rekindle hope: tomorrow is another day. Simple as it may seem, that sentence holds the essence of endurance in darkness. For my generation, which has lost and rebelled so many times, it sums up our experience. In a world constantly changing, perhaps the only certainty is this power, the power to rise again. And that is why Gone with the Wind, despite its flaws and